Men and Women's Fashion in the 1920s by Lindsay Seagraves. The 1920s, probably the most daring decade for men and women, lots of changes and lots of new trends that were going to be made for the future to come in the fashion world. In these years, women really wanted to be able to be comfortable in their clothing just as men did. They felt as if they could be more open and free to what they wanted to wear, just like the men and women were able to do. Women took up smoking, took more pride in their sexuality, equality of what men were allowed to do, which led to them wanting freedom of attire. Many women believed that in order for them to have the same opportunity in the workforce as men, they needed to appear more masculine and not as much feminine. For many years, women felt like they needed to hide all their God-given attributes such as their breasts, shoulders, knees, and even their beautiful hair. They finally went against what the norm was, and therefore women's skirts rose up high to the knees, and their hair was cut short in the boyish bob. Women also started smoking and drinking in public and seemed to not really care anymore if it made them look bad. They wanted to be equal with what the men were allowed to do. The waistline of the dresses dipped to the hips and were much shorter than before. Women wanting to be more equal with what men were allowed to do became known as the flapper. The boyish flapper look was definitely something that seemed to be in. Pajamas were worn to bed and not the normal night dresses. The fashionable body type was thin rather than slim and showing almost the bones. The body had to have slender legs, flat chest, and twiggy legs. The clothes in the mood of this type of look were known as scarcely an age of nostalgic charm. The extremely shorter skirts that this time period was noted for was presented in 1920 through 1921, as the hemlines seemed to keep rising higher and higher, reaching the shortest level it's ever been at, just covering the knee in 1927. Women were determined to make a statement. Gowns of the 1920s seemed to carry out a theme of daytime dresses. These dresses had a very short waistline, and they were rather straight/flat looking on the body. Being that the typical body figure was slim, women enjoyed wearing these throughout the day, shopping, working, or just a casual stroll through the city or the park. Women felt very powerful in these gowns and very confident in them. Women wanted to become sassier and wanted to get away from the dull and boring styles that they were used to. Men sort of had a different fashion look as well. The men always dressed very formal, no matter what the occasion. They seemed to always want to look their very best. They would wear three-piece suits with a suit jacket and no collar. Suits were made of really thick wool, and pants were made of wool-based flannel, which made them very heavy, nothing compared to what we have today, which are much lighter and not as thick. Suit jackets were single or double-breasted and had about 3 to 4 buttons that went up the front of the suit. They felt very sophisticated and elegant in this attire, as well looked very sharp and handsome. Their suits and ties were fairly neutral color and didn't really pop like they do nowadays. Patterns included big plaids or a solid tone. Today we have designs of all kinds of men's belts. Some blue-collar workers, sports players, and young teens would have the exception of being able to wear something more casual than a suit and tie every day. The men had more of a slim-fit attire in the 1920s, but that seemed to change towards the 1930s when they started wearing a more boxy and loose clothing. The men and women's fashion in the 1920s really made a statement and sort of set the mood for the next decade of fashion. Fashion has always taken a big interest to me, and I love to go through each time period and see what all kinds of fashion statements were made. Some fashion statements back in the day have made a comeback in today's society, and I know I love that and enjoy that. I definitely am a fan of vintage fashion. I can't wait to see how drastically the fashion will change as we get older and we get to see what our children and grandchildren will dress like. Thank you.